So this is part A of the KhoodeelaarTV campaign, world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street newspapers. And it's Wednesday, the 20th of January, 2021. We start by looking again at the image of Miranda Hart with her beloved Peggy, as printed in the Daily Mail yesterday, Tuesday, the 19th of January 2021. And we shall be continuing with the account. That would be the detailed part 2 of the account of the attack by the bearded Muslims and their complicit colluders, a gang of racists that they encouraged, aided, abetted, and hired and paid to carry out the attack on the Kitten's house in Brick Lane in August, mainly in August 2012. The bearded Muslims included one member of the so-called committee and a trustee of the SSBA Community Trust, SSBA Community Trust, which is a registered charity and is used and has been used as the kind of front for the business that is separately called Spitalfield Small Business Association, based in both registered addresses. Both organizations are registered at the address at 7215 Great Orex Street. Great Orex, one word, Street, London, E1 5NF. We shall be diagnosing the papers in the context of the cover-up that they practice on the facts of the behavior of the registered big money charities, including the RSPCA, that are funded by mainly public donations and significant state support. And the fact that the RSPCA has been around for a very long time is important, because if the RSPCA was doing its job of preventing cruelty to animals, then the criminals' attack on the Kitten's house in Brick Lane would never have happened, because the RSPCA was directly sent emails, several emails, and those were sent with the maximum standard of transparency. The communications to the RSPCA were sent and they were copied to the Metropolitan Police and to the criminals at the SSBA. Now we shall, as I said, we shall be continuing this at length, this report, this account. And this is all exclusive, not only the diagnosis of Fleet Street, But this account is world exclusive as well. Anyone wanting to refer to this must refer to this expressly, to this program, and the short authoring and publishing editorial copyrights disclaimers are there on the screen. So they should use in full the statement whenever referring to this or mentioning this. Now, we are just slightly looking at today's Daily Mirror on page 23. Page 23 at the bottom, it says, HSBC to shut 82 more high street branches. That's HSBC. Now, HSBC physically has its headquarters sited in the Canary Wharf kind of complex or complexes situated on the part of land inside the London Borough of Tower Hamlets in East London that has long been called Isle of Dogs, ISLE, Isle of Dogs. We are not going into the history of the Isle of Dogs, the etymology and the naming of the place as Isle of Dogs, except to say that it was for a very long time left unused, disused, or derelict. Very much similar to the site of what is now the so-called Olympic 2012 Games Park in Stratford, let's say 2 miles or thereabouts to the northeast of the Isle of Dogs. And the Isle of Dogs is now occupied by at least 5 very tall buildings, one of the tallest being that of the HSBC. Now, HSBC is to shut 82 more high street branches. That's in the Daily Mirror, which is performing a cover-up in that headline because it is directly linked to the coming into operation of the so-called Brexit. And during the year or two of Theresa May's kind of very fraught communications for Brexit with the European Union, public concerns were expressed about jobs being lost inside the HSBC and other banks and other financial operations that had been running from addresses in the City of London and as its de facto part, the Isle of Dogs, Canary Wharf. And those were directly explained as being linked to the forthcoming Brexit. And it's not just these financial sectors. We are not discussing the essential fundamental wrong or wrongness involved in the financial market in the context of society, etc., in this part, but just to highlight the fact that Boris Johnson's lying slogan, which was actually prompted by Nigel Nasty Farage and other liars, promoting the Little England racist Brexiteering agenda narrative, taking back control all the controls that they were referring to and implying were linked to the economic independence, as they said, that England would acquire. The UK doesn't feature as a United Kingdom, despite the name. It is actually Britain, and Britain's core being Little England. The narrative, the mentality, and the agenda is based on Little England, the Little English outlook, to the effect that the whole world outside of Little England is smaller than Little England. That is the mentality, and that is the perfect kind of summary of the brainlessness of the gullibles, the millions of gullibles that were lied to, or rather that were fed new lies about their being the superior race, whatever that is. And this headline in the Daily Mirror could be in the Daily Express, or the Mail on Sunday, or the Daily Mail, or the Sun, Scum, or the Scum on Sunday, or the Daily Star, or the Boris Graph. Because it hides the actual reason, and that the evidence that the job losses are directly linked to the Brexit. And they're not explaining that in the copy, that is to say, the main text under that heading. Let's say what they're saying. We are saying that they're not explaining, and let's read what they're actually literally saying. HSBC is to close another 82 branches, several a week from April to September, that is this year, 2021. It will leave some customers having to travel more than 10 miles to the nearest branch. HSBC said counter staff would be offered jobs elsewhere, but that redundancies among other employees were likely. Before the latest cull, that is the cut, HSBC has axed 555 branches since 2015, said consumer group Which. And this is the hiding tactic by the Daily Mirror. Although they're saying it's the consumer group Which that has said the HSBC is going to continue to scrap jobs. It is actually more detailed internal information that the Daily Mirror is actually denying knowledge of, but actually has knowledge of. So let's see what they're saying about the HSBC. So this one is 3 months old. Exactly 3 months old, 27th of October 2020. And 3 months ago, the item about the HSBC said HSBC has axed 6,000 jobs this year as cost cutting accelerate. And this was a piece compiled online by uk.finance.yahoo.com. And then a week later, on the 5th of November 2020, EuroWeeklyNews.com reported that HSBC was set to cut around 100 jobs in the UK retail banks. And it's confirming that HSBC, which was described in there as Europe's biggest bank, resumed cutting around 35,000 jobs in June 2020, that is, which was the plan prior to the pandemic in March. However, after a delay, it's now back on the cards with this latest announcement. That was the announcement that was made, dated the 5th of November 2020. And the fact that the plan, the 35,000 jobs cut program, began before the pandemic surfaced, was recognized as having surfaced in Britain, is to do with Brexit. And that was the tendency in terms of the news of thousands and thousands of jobs being lost, directly resulting from Brexit. But the newspapers, including this Yahoo UK Finance website, were lying about Brexit being the reason. And the reasons are, in terms of the finance and financial market, the reasons have been explained adequately by others. And in our diagnosis, we cannot add anything original to what has been available online and accessibly for the last 2 years. The nearer the so-called Brexit deal or agreement came, the more detailed became the announcements and the information and the reports based on internal kind of briefing by the financial kind of operators, including and as typified by HSBC. So that's not taking back control. The phrase that the liars pushing for Brexit said for the consumption of the gullibles, the brainwashed of Little England that bought this hook, line, and sinker. And it is going to affect every day there are going to be jobs lost, directly resulting from the lack of business with the former partners of the UK in the European Union. And the partnership is not about just doing business with other EU members, but partnership entailed and allowed for favorable terms and facilities for the UK businesses to access other countries through the European Union. Remember, the European Union was originally and basically the European Economic Union. That was the EEU, or European Economic Market, or the Common Market. Common Market neatly summed up the actual purpose for the original formation of the bloc, that was to have and share a common market. And that common market benefited member countries more than it caused them losses. And then when the common market became reliable for the member countries, it became also quite clear that a more hands-on kind of approach to basic human rights was needed by the European Union. So therefore, a number of declarations, agreements, charters, etc. were drafted, and then they were kind of signed by the UK and other EU members, bringing about an environment in constitutional international law that facilitates the implementation of many of the requirements of the UK's and the other member countries signed up status as members of the United Nations and many of its agencies and other organizations. With the slogan being mounted by Boris Johnson and Michael Gove, with the ferocity that they actually used to impose the slogan, assert the slogan, that they would take back control, it was imprinted on the minds of the brainwashable and brainwashed, gullible millions of the Little England that that was the way to go. But they thought that that was the way to go to prosperity, not poverty, to plenty, not shortage. Now, the tendency has been shortage in the last 2 weeks. And it is impossible, looking at the long range of the economic prospects, based on statistics and indices this week, let's say, it is impossible to project a positive economic future for post-Brexit Britain in the foreseeable future. So shortages will increase, get worse. More and more jobs will be lost. And whatever control Johnson and Gove et al. Promised post-Brexit will get harder to get hold of, ever harder by the day. We shall in due course, of course, discuss in detail, again as part of the exclusive, original world exclusive diagnosis by Fleet Street, of Fleet Street, diagnosis of the coverage by Fleet Street, and the cover-ups of the Fleet Street papers, and the diagnosis being carried out exclusively by the Khoodeelaar campaign, as presented, edited by myself, Muhammad Haque. Now, in terms of the conventional kind of trainings, I'm not limited to conventional training, but I have had all of those conventional trainings at all the disciplines, at all the levels. Now, I am now intellectually and evidentially and factually and contextually running the commentaries and the narratives at levels beyond what has been available and can be available by universities, both in the UK and elsewhere in the Western Europe. because it's the evidence. It's not the presumption of the evidence, but actual facts and the behavior and the evidence day to day, which is why this is the proof that we are doing it day to day. This cover-up piece, HSBC to shut 82 more high street branches. This is a lying item by the Daily Mirror. And the Daily Express, the Beaverbrook legacy of poison, shoring up under any pretext, with any pretext, the image of Boris Johnson and his cabal, is admitting. It's admitting that the COVID is so severe and is still raging and rampant that any relaxation to the lockdown and restrictions will bring about peril and cause peril. That's rare because up to now, the Daily Express, which in context we call the Daily Suppress, has been in wanton and brazen denial of the evidence and the truth about the unfitness and the failures and the negligence of the Boris Johnson-fronted cabal, posing as the government, incumbent government at number 10 Downing Street, London Southwest 1. Now, this one also has got a reluctant recognition of the president-elect, who is supposed to be sworn in later today in the USA time. Not being sworn in just yet, but he's scheduled to be sworn in today, Wednesday, the 20th of January 2021. 2 months since the election, 2 calendar months since the election. But this headline, COVID, relax at our peril, is not without evidence of its misuse or its being misused as another way to shore up the image of Boris Johnson as the go-getting, getting COVID done or getting vaccine done Prime Minister. And it says, on deadliest day, Prime Minister issues warning as pressure mounts to ease lockdown. Boris Johnson stressed that sticking to lockdown rules is as important as ever, as COVID notched up its deadliest day yet, that is yesterday, Tuesday, the 19th of January 2021. Another 1,610 virus deaths were reported yesterday. In one day, 1,610 people died of the virus. In the worst 24 hours of the outbreak, meaning that 91,470 people have died within 28 days of a positive test. 91,470 people have died within 28 days of a positive test. So we shall be looking more at the role of Fleet Street in covering up. Now, there is a continuation in the Express or Suppress against Meghan Markle and Harry on page 9. Meghan signaled the end of our relationship, her father tells court. Now the main item is that Meghan Markle, in an alleged letter sent to Markle, didn't say that she loved her father. It didn't even ask how I was, claims that alleged letter. And this says, now I have to say something about this guy. Nobody ever heard of him. Meghan Markle was heard of by some people at least, because she was an actor in Hollywood. And she was an actor in a leading part, playing a leading part in a series. So she had been heard of. As for her father, Thomas Markle said he wanted to correct the lies leveled against him by Meghan's friends in a USA Magazine article. Now, a few months ago, this guy was reported to be nearing death, which he has been reported to be doing almost for 2 years now. Every now and then, he is either almost about to be dead because of illness and whatever, and then he is reported to be back again with a big news item against Meghan Markle and Harry. Well, we are not. This program is not a supporter or fan or anything like that of these two. But we are objectively comparing the role of Fleet Street in carrying out pieces attacking Meghan Markle almost simultaneously when they are carrying out outlandishly exaggerated plugs for Kate Middleton and her and Will's children. Now, we don't want to go into details about the children, but the children are exhibited as they are being exhibited today. Here. That's a spread on pages 4 and 5 of a special supplement of the Express about dedicating to the royal children. It's not us saying it, but they are running a special supplement, calling them the royal cuties. And it is claiming, this supplement of lying propaganda, saying that these royal cuties actually lifted the spirit of the nation. That is a treble layered lie. There is no nation. There is the United Kingdom, and there are individual kind of components of the United Kingdom. The biggest, numerically, the biggest one being the Little England. But then there is Cornwall, there is Wales, there is Scotland, and there is northern part of Ireland. So these are 5 different nations. And so therefore, what on earth are they saying these cuties lifted the spirit of? Which part? And it's only in the same paper, same edition of the Daily Suppress, the Daily Suppressing the Truth, in which they are running the latest attack piece against Meghan Markle and citing the latest spewing as disclosed allegedly to a court by Meghan's father, Thomas Markle. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 pages of the supplement. The back page is that, and as I have shown, page 4 and 5 and followed by 5, pages 6 and 7 is another huge exhibition of the children, the cuties. And they actually recruit or exploit or misappropriate the image, or one image of David Attenborough, who is himself recited as a national treasure. And here is the express, remembering John F. Kennedy. And they're doing this as a peg to today's scheduled inauguration of Joe Biden as president. This is not something they have done before. They have not done for the 5 years. They have not mentioned the Democratic Party. And Ann Widdecombe who is a fascist, who is a racist fascist and a personification of cruelty to women, is now recognizing the NHS by default, through the back door. And this is a headline, last rites for the NHS crippled by COVID. This is a headline that carries 3 different kind of messages against the idea of the NHS and all against the idea of a competent state serving people at the point of need, and the idea of protecting people by the government, and the idea of the duty of government to protect people, safeguard people in vulnerable positions and in great need of help. Now, Ann Widdecombe, here in the image, she is imaged with a artificially blonde hair, but it doesn't show that it's artificial because it's not written as a statement, as a description. But she is actually a brunette, or was a brunette before she went gray. But the reason why I am referring to that is that change of hair color to the blonde color was a direct result of Ann Widdecombe being outed as a fascist, cruel minister or MP who had expressed shockingly unbelievable support for torturing pregnant women in prison, or women who were in vulnerable position but were in jail. She is a conservative woman, and she was supporting, torturing, and mistreating women prisoners. We are referring here to white women. This is not about the race of the women being different from her race or ethnicity. So she was quite openly, brazenly contemptuous of the rights of other white women that were in prison. It only needs to be imagined what her attitude would be to women prisoners in, with background, African or Asian background, and what she would say about women with Muslim background who were in prison. So after this cruelty and kind of ruthlessness and lack of compassion on her part against women in prison, after that became known, became public, the Daily Mirror actually gave her the name or published the name for her, which was based on a character of a horror film, but she was given the feminine, the female kind of part. And she was compared with a horror character, horrible character. And so therefore she changed her physical appearance in order to make herself come across as softer than the image of her as the cruelty personified. So she's saying that the last rites meaning the formal kind of rituals after a person has died or is about to die, that is the NHS has never been able to meet every last demand placed upon it and never will. Now, that is a confirmation of what we have been saying for months on this channel, that since the foundation of the National Health Service, the idea behind it being that health service, health care would be provided to people at the point of need, not based on an ability to pay. And that point of need was universal. That is to say, it didn't depend, the provision of the health service to the people in need of health service at the point of need, that is, did not depend on their ability to pay. That is universal. Just like a very good item of welfare benefit called child benefit, until the Tories started to mess with it, there was a child benefit that was paid to parents of children, regardless of the parents' level of income. Now, Anne Widdecombe was used by the Daily Mirror or condemned by the Daily Mirror as a foul, evil, heartless, ruthless, cruel, unkind person. And she was given the female name for Karloff, and she was called Doris Karloff. And Doris Karloff was such a hit with the public that she became instantly called, began to be called Doris Karloff more than Anne Widdecombe. So overwhelming was the approval by the ordinary public of that nickname, Doris Karloff. And so she underwent a series of makeovers, including her pretensions. Because as a fascist, she had been on the record making some of the most horrible, unkind, unsympathetic, unhelpful, ungenerous, insulting, unfeeling comments about other people, including about other women. Now, at this point, I have to say that many of the anti-women comments are published by women, white women, who are ideologically, politically supportive of the Conservative Party. Not all the Conservative Party people are as cruel, women as cruel as Anne Widdecombe and the others. For example, Theresa May keeps trying. Theresa May keeps trying to come across as being less hostile than she is. As we shall be looking at one of her comments reported in one of the Fleet Street outlets today. But the tag of Boris Karloff actually stuck in the vocabulary, the ordinary colloquial vocabulary. The dart sticks or the dart stuck means if you throw dirt and rubbish on the wall, it sticks, it doesn't come off. So the Boris Karloff was the name of the male character in the horror movie series, and the Doris Karloff applied to Anne Widdecombe after her cruel treatment of women prisoners came to light. And since that time, she has been given any number of platforms, any number of commissions by chat shows, talk shows, so-called whatever, radio and television, mainstream, and columns in Fleet Street papers. And she has pushed for that kind of slot or slots, those kinds of slots for herself, so that she could go on justifying herself and explaining her role and her behavior and her attitude. And while doing so, gain additional thousands and thousands of pounds and get rid of the image of her as an evil, foul, fascistic, cruel woman who hated other women, especially women in poverty and low income, etc. So for her to get this headline in the Daily Express today is completely inconsistent with everything she believes in. And when you read the actual copy underneath the headline, that is what is revealed. She is exposed as having no sympathy for the idea of the NHS. And we are reading the copy of this item. And she is supporting, as I have said before, I read that she is supporting the conservatives' ideological opposition to there being a national health service. So the headline, "Last Rights for NHS Crippled by COVID," is treble layered lie, because they're looking for any excuse to write a headline that says that the NHS is over, it's ended, it's finished. And they can't say, and they won't say that the NHS is finished, because the conservatives and the people who set their agenda and people who are served by the conservatives in government don't want an NHS, because that way the private business of health, or private business in the name of health or in the health market, cannot do its exploitative business. That means larger numbers of people are exposed to death by neglect and negligence and lack of access to health care. So the so-called Supreme Court judge, Jonathan Sumshon or Sumpton, however it is pronounced, who abused the platform on the BBC at the weekend and insulted the idea of everyone's life being sacred, when he said that this woman who had been undergoing cancer treatment or treatment for cancer, that her life was not as important as some other lives. This has been the raging mentality, that raging thrust in the minds of so many people in positions of making so many serious decisions affecting other people's lives, literally other people's lives. And the Labour Party, while in opposition, because in government the position is even worse, but in opposition the Labour Party is in ideal position to thoroughly examine the evidence on all these key issues affecting society, so that when in government, whenever that is, they can deal with the issues with less obstruction and less diversion, and can actually get down to bringing an end to the denials and deprivations and lying that the previous conservatives had built into the state structures in the latest rounds of their attacks on the idea of public services. So Doris Karloff is being given the platform by the Beaverbrooks liar daily suppress the truth to attack the idea of the NHS, and attack it by blaming COVID as if COVID was a personality. COVID is not a personality. It is the state of negligence and unfitness on the part of the government, fronted by the cabal, personified and embodied in Boris Johnson. So she is Anne Widdecombe. Doris Karloff is a supporter of Boris Johnson, has been a supporter of everything right-wing and racist and cruel that Boris Johnson supports. So she is blaming COVID and hiding in blaming COVID for in her way, inevitable end of the NHS by denying the fact that the NHS was kept unprepared, unequipped for decades by the Conservatives. And not only during the COVID-19 crisis pandemic, but when there was no such crisis or pandemic, the NHS was still being not adequately funded and supported. And instead it was exposed and kept exposed to exploitation by the racketeers operating billions of pounds worth of racket through contracts and through confidential deals among pharma companies and their consultant agents installed as consultants within the NHS system itself. And what is happening today in the rest of Fleet Street is similar. And let's look at this other bit about and here is a small item by the Lying Daily Suppress. It says in the headline or in the heading, Brexit hit seafood farms can claim £100,000. Now, this is the far from taking back control, the losing control of the business. That's what it is. But they're not admitting it in the headline. They're saying seafood exporters hit by Brexit red tape will be able to claim up to £100,000 in compensation. The government has said, now that is, again, a lie. It's not red tape, it's the actual contents of the agreement that the Express has actually promoted to shore up and create the image of Boris Johnson as the competent negotiator. Is the terms of the contract, of the agreement, the deal so-called, the word used so often in the last 3 years. So the Daily Mail today is saying that, yes, is publishing this. This is the point about Theresa May that I mentioned earlier. This is what Theresa May is pretending to be, that she is compassionate and caring. That's the headline, that Boris Johnson is, or his moral failure. Now let's have a look at this. In Mail article hailing Biden era, former Prime Minister gives stark verdict on Johnson over aid cuts and flouting law. Remember, flouting law is never mentioned in the papers. And we have been making extensive references to the UK flouting its obligations, which it is under, according to the status of the UK as a signed up member of various international agencies, agreements, declarations, statements, etc. So this is the contextual background to this piece in the Daily Mail today, Wednesday, the 20th of January 2021. Theresa May today issued her most strident criticism yet of Boris Johnson, accusing him of abandoning Britain's position of global moral leadership. Remember what we said in January 1992, when I presented on Channel 4 television news slot called Slot, a short commentary about John Major's then imminent appearance as the representative of the United Kingdom, which was holding the post, the circular post of President of the General Assembly. In January 1992, I wrote and presented on Channel 4 Slot, a program asking for Major and other Western countries to address poverty at home in Africa and in Asia for millions of people who were desperate to get out of poverty and seek asylum and a place to settle in any part of the world, preferably across the Western European countries. So that is what has been absent. Now, this is very rare that another Tory ex-prime minister. So how long is it? This is now 21 years, calendar years into the new century, and there are add another 8 years of the last century. 29 years ago, I had said that. And for 29 years, Major and whoever has been the part of government in Western European countries, including the UK, have allowed 29 years, numbers of denials of people seeking way out of poverty and hunger, destitution and genocide. 29 years of additional suffering and continuing. So 29 years since I gave the clear statement and manifesto of action. Here is a recently retired Prime Minister of Britain, Theresa May, saying that Boris Johnson has symbolized the failure by abandoning Britain's position of global moral leadership. Now, of course, that statement is contentious, and I don't accept that at all for a moment. But the fact that she is actually referring to morality is important, significant, and is worth examining on the contents and the evidence and in context, which I shall be doing in this part as well as in the later parts. And we shall be talking about the attack on the Kitten's house in Brick Lane very soon. Now, The Guardian is running a similar kind of heading to the one by the Daily Mail about Theresa May accusing Boris Johnson of abandoning global moral leadership. That is based on the falsehood that there was a global moral leadership by Britain in the first place. There was never moral leadership by Britain. But let's look at the copy in the Guardian online version. Theresa May has accused Boris Johnson of abandoning Britain's position of global moral leadership in her most unrestrained attack on her successor yet. Writing in the Daily Mail, ahead of President-elect Joe Biden's inauguration, the former Prime Minister had stern words about both the outgoing US President Donald Trump and her successor, that is Boris Johnson. Theresa May said that in her view, Johnson has failed to honor British values. Now, this is again a very untruthful kind of assertion, which we shall be doing correctly, dissecting in a minute. May said that in her view, Johnson has failed to honor British values by threatening to break international law during Brexit trade negotiations and backing out of the foreign aid target, writing that these two maneuvers had not raised our credibility in the eyes of the world. Threatening to break international law by going back on a treaty we had just signed and abandoning our position of global moral leadership as the only major economy to meet both the 2% defense spending target and the 0.7% international aid target were not actions which raised our credibility in the eyes of the world, she wrote. In her article, May appeared to remind Johnson that he needed to live up to our values to have any aspirations for a truly global Britain, to play a key role on the international political stage, and urged him to adopt compromises. Now, shall not read any more of that because Theresa May is doing an internal kind of dig at Boris Johnson because of the singularly foul and hateful campaign that he led against her within the Conservative Party. Because Theresa May is the person who was exposed as having issued directions while she was in post as the UK's Minister for the Interior, that is to say, what is called the Home Secretary. She issued the directive for Home Office and other government staff to create a hostile environment in which particularly people from the Caribbean, who are also referred to as the people from Jamaica who landed in a port in east of England at the height of the shortage of manual and other labor workers in Britain. And they were treated throughout the period since they arrived, treated with obvious racist kind of mistreatment, negligence, and hostility. So let's look at the hostile environment. And this was the hostile environment deters people from going to the doctor for fear of raking up a huge bill or being reported, detained, deported. It deters undocumented migrants from reporting crime to the police. It deters undocumented migrants from reporting unsafe working conditions or exploitative employers. That particular description is dated online here, 17th of July 2020. And according to the Joint Council for the Welfare of Immigrants, their explanation of the hostile environment reads as follows: discrimination, exploitation, and lonely deaths. And it says Elvis, not his real name, a Filipino man, died at home of suspected coronavirus, too afraid to seek medical help in case he got deported. Michael lost his job as a special needs teacher and was threatened with deportation after he was accused of having no right to be in the UK, despite having lived in the UK for more than 50 years, 50 years. Anjay was exploited by one employer after another, with wages stolen, overcrowded accommodation, or sleeping rough and barely enough food to survive on. These stories and millions more are the results of one set of policies, the hostile environment. Some use the term hostile environment to describe all policies which make life difficult for migrants living in the UK, treating them as less deserving of dignity and humanity than British citizens. More specifically, and that's where we come into contact with the role of Theresa May herself. More specifically, it is a set of policies introduced in 2012 by then Home Secretary Theresa May with the aim of making life unbearable or unbearably difficult in the United Kingdom for those who cannot show the right paperwork. Or, as she said at the time, the aim is to create here in Britain a really hostile environment for illegal immigrants. Now, many of the direct victims of the hostile environment have been found to have been people from the Windrush, so-called Windrush migrants, let's say, Windrush generation. So, against that record, Theresa May giving lectures about Britain having moral leadership in the past as compared to the time since Johnson became prime minister is factually untrue, and she cannot be allowed to make that kind of assertion. As to the reference to Joe Biden and today's scheduled swearing in by Joe Biden, she says in the article, the election of reliable President Biden offers a golden opportunity for Britain to play a key role in making the world safer. Now we shall come to the reason why she is prepared to make herself go on the record as supporting Joe Biden. She suggests that her successor, Johnson, will be unable to grasp it unless there is an end to macho diplomacy where a few self-styled strongmen like Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin face off against each other. In a pointed reference to Mr. Johnson's vow to build back better, she says that strong leadership knows when to compromise. However, in a statement issued to the Mail last night, Johnson pledged to work hand in hand with the new US president to defend democracy and tackle Britain and America's shared challenges, and so on. But this is the two-page spread in the Daily Mail today, based on Theresa May's name to the article. Britain threatened to break the law. We abandoned our global moral leadership. We did not raise our credibility in the eyes of the world. Now, the loss of morality, whether it was sustained as a claim in the first place, putting that aside for the moment, the commitment to moral leadership and moral and ethical leadership are less important than commitment to moral and ethical practice, behavior. And if moral leadership or behavior is missing from the behavior of Boris Johnson-fronted cabal today or in the last 18 months or whatever, then moral and ethical conduct is very much absent from the behavior of the elected local councillors, such as those in place and those who have been in place for the last 20 years in Tower Hamlets. And back to the attack, the August 2012 attack on the Kitten's house in Brick Lane. The attack mounted, altogether carried out by about 12 people. And the attack was conceived by a gang including several bearded Muslim men, very closely involved with the SSBA Community Trust, doing business as the Spitalfield Small Business Association. And in a series of attacks targeting one of the Kittens, a white woman, a proven liar and an adulteress who had an affair with her teacher while she was at school, who was imposed at the time as the director or the chief executive of the so-called SSBA. She harassed a kitten on at least 3 separate occasions. And as she did that, her harassing torturing, traumatizing this kitten was watched by a number of others, including at least 2 bearded men and several other men and women. This actually happened. It's not a an extract from the writings of Charles Dickens, who wrote about the East End, or George Orwell, who too wrote about the East End. These are the 2 writers that are known internationally. That's why I'm mentioning them. There is no comparable writer in terms of the name recognition of these 2 that can be mentioned. So that for that reason, I'm doing that reference to those 2. And when this white woman of dubious character and known proven liar and a criminal and a racist was engaged in the harassment and attacks on the kitten, because the other 2 kittens were hiding, and this one was hiding in another space in the building. Now, anyone who witnessed that, other than those who watched it and did that to appease that racist, adulterous, criminal woman, would have the challenge to deal with. What do I mean by challenge? First, the police. If the police were there, remember in the previous part, I have said that a number of emails were sent to the Metropolitan Police, and they didn't take any action to stop the harassment. That is a fact. So, whether that is the type of hostility that is described in that explainer about hostile environment, we shall not make a definitive comment about that connection at this stage. But that is the fact that the police took no action despite being sent. That is, the London Metropolitan Police took no action to stop this serial criminal attacks on the kitten by this racist white woman who had a record of being a proven liar, who had been sacked from one of her previous jobs because of lying and abuse and conflict of interest connected with alleged personal relationship with a person who was on the committee of the organization where she had been employed and whose resources she was abused. She was accused of having abused and lied about. So this woman was repeatedly mounting the attack on the kitten. Frightened kitten, scared kitten, targeted by such a evil, foul person who was trying to unsettle it, scare it, and destroy it. So if an independent witness, not part of the attack watchers, wanted to intervene, they would have to do that lawfully, in my opinion, and on the evidence. And if they wanted to intervene lawfully without breaking the law themselves, they needed solid evidence, confirmed evidence that they would be receiving the support from the legal, lawful authorities, first of which, of course, was the London Metropolitan Police. So the fact is that the London police were contacted, but they did not take any action. They did not reply. They did not respond with action, let's say. And the second lawful constitutional law structure was the locally elected council, the London Borough of Tower Hamlets Council. I'm taking longer pauses between sentences for the simple reason that anyone watching this can reflect and not miss anything I'm saying because of the speed. And I'm going, the pace is slower for that reason. Comprehension and understanding. So the local elected Tower Hamlets Council could not be relied on or contacted in the context of preventing this criminal, racist, corrupt, adulterous woman from continuing the attack on a desperately scared kitten. Why? Because the locally elected Tower Hamlets Council was involved in the harassment. Two of its employees, one is the name of one of them, a woman from America or North America, as Craddock. She was directly involved, as was the then employee in post in Tower Hamlets Council as an employee allegedly as part of the environment section. So those two were directly part of the conspiracy and the plot to harass the kittens and the plot to attack the kitten's house. And what happened was that the communications that were sent drawing attention to the serial harassment of the kittens by this adulterous, criminal, racist, crooked, white female who had an affair with her school teacher while she was at school. These communications were copied. The communications didn't mention any of these facts about her, personally, about her being an adulterous female who abused her employment and exposed the organization to serious funding sanctions by the government because the previous employer, where she did the crimes and had the affair, and in addition to the affair while she was at school, was a non-profit so-called organization in the main, which is the Spitalfields Housing Co-op, which was funded by the then Greater London Council when it was started at the end of the 1970s. and the beginning of the 1980s. And it continued in existence mainly based on the support from the public sector. We shall come to the various stages of corruption and abuse of the resources of the Spitalfields Housing Co-op in due course, but not in this part, not at this point immediately, except to say that that criminal woman had exposed this organization while she was in post at that organization to severe funding and other sanctions because of her misconduct and her abuse of her position. So the woman with such dubious, bad character and bad personality and lack of regard for the standards of ethics and morality, for her to be hired as the chief executive of the SSBA, which post actually includes being chief executive or chief executive employee for the purposes of the SSBA Community Trust. To appoint her was an intentional act to corrupt and abuse and misuse the resources of the SSBA Community Trust and the SSBA. Now, who did that? Who chose that, and who did the lobbying, and who did the actual decision making behind the appointment of this woman to these posts? We shall discuss those factually in due course and cite relevant communications that we have about the damage and the destruction that she took a leading part in causing to the Kitten's House and to the community and to the wider interests and purposes and activities that were ongoing to benefit the poorest, the most vulnerable, and the most discriminated against groups of people in Tower Hamlets, in London, in England, in the UK, and across the world. Now, at the time that these attacks were taking place, communications were sent not only to the police and to the RSPCA, but they were sent to Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer, who is now leader in the name of the opposition in Parliament, at the expense of the Labour Party and the society at large. Keir Starmer was then in post as the DPP, that is to say, Director of Public Prosecutions, installed in an outfit, an agency called the Crown Prosecution Service. The CPS is an agency, the executive agency of the UK Ministry of the Interior. That is called the Home Office. Now, as I said before, Keir Starmer, on the record, is a liar and is dishonest, is ignorant, is prejudiced, is biased, and is unfit to be even an MP because of his bad conduct and bad character. Keir Starmer's badness, unfitness includes or is highlighted by the fact that he issued a directive or a number of directives in the last month of his tenure as the Director of Public Prosecutions. And those directives were calculated as part of the hostile environment to be inflicted on the poorest people in Britain who were allegedly engaging in making up stories about their poverty in order to get financial support, the welfare benefit. And Starmer, in his stern directives, one document or more than one, that's why I said directive or directives later, he condemned such people in the harshest possible language and condemned them as criminals, like they had no need for the money, they were not poor, and they were kind of criminals because of some defects in their personalities or whatever. That's not the case with the absolute majority of the people in low income. They are not criminals, and they do not fake or fabricate, never have done, stories in order to get the welfare benefit. It is the inadequacy of the amount made available to poor people in poverty that is the reason why people are desperate to find other ways to make the necessary income available to themselves and their family, if their families, themselves and their families. So Keir Starmer was sent the communications. How many, I cannot say at this moment because I'm not looking at the relevant records, but there were enough communications sent to Keir Starmer as the DPP about what was going on in Brick Lane, that is, a gang of criminals was mounting serial attacks on 3 kittens. So we've got the Metropolitan Police not responding, Tower Hamlets Council being directly involved in the attacks, and the Director of Public Prosecutions not responding. So an objective person or an objective member of the public upholding or observing or abiding by the due process, the rule of law, and not doing anything physical or trying to do anything physical to stop them, had these difficult challenges. And the fourth problem is that if in the event that these 3 didn't apply, if the objective observer, concerned and kind and compassionate, concerned for the welfare of the kittens under attack, if they wanted to organize or mobilize a physical number of people against the attackers, they could do that. Cognitively and rationally, they could have done that. But they shouldn't have done that. Why? Because any physical confrontation among such a number of people within a building would really expose those very 3 kittens to further danger and distress and uncertainty. Think about that. That is why such a physical mobilization was not undertaken. And the primary and the paramount concern was to make sure that the kittens faced as little uncertainty, threat, and pressure as possible. So to keep the level of aggression in the environment, in that confined space, to keep the pressure as low as possible. That was the aim. And that had to be instinctively decided. And it was decided not to do anything that could aggravate the physical tension in the atmosphere. The kittens don't have human vocabulary or language. But anyone who knows kittens and anyone who knows puppies or dogs, as Miranda Hart knows and is just about able to share her feelings with the people, would know that the most responsible thing to do to safeguard the welfare of the kittens in such a situation as was going on in Brick Lane in August 2012 would be to not add to the tension, the aggravation, and the risk, which is what was done.